2018. The first item of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Judd.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Judd, thank you. First action item will be approval of the minutes from December 12th, 2017, and February 27th, 2018. Now, I would like to ask the board members, did you get a chance to read the February 27th, 2018 meeting minutes? I know they came out a little bit late.
These are the corrected ones, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, because I know that there were some corrections that needed to be made.
I was gonna pull the 27th, the February 27th minutes off the agenda to be approved at the next meeting. But if everybody's had a chance to read them,
Okay,
I would say let's go ahead and approve them and just get that done.
fine. Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Is that good with everybody? Robin, you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of December the 12th, 2017, and December the 27th, 2018, as prepared and circulated.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Christmas. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Eby. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so carried. All right, this is the time for public comment. This would be for anything you would like to talk about that is not on the agenda. I know there's a number of individuals that want to take a few minutes to congratulate Mr. Wolf on his impending retirement. So I will entertain one person at a time. You'll need to come up and give your name and address and everything. So.
Okay, go, Jack.
Jack Doherty. Do I have to give my address?
Jack, you're good.
All right.
You're good.
I am here tonight as a representative of the Friendship Center Operating Board, and I am here to express our appreciation and thanks to George Wolf for the service that he's provided not just to our board, but to all of the residents of Lower Paxton Township. During my time on the board, George has been an incredible asset in guiding us through sometimes very complicated worlds of municipal finance, human resources, public relations, and customer service. George has been there every step of the way, from the construction of our facility through the tough times of the recession to the completion of our new renovations. George has been, he's provided tremendous guidance and good counsel and has been instrumental in making our facility one of the premier community fitness centers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And while doing that, he has maintained our focus on assuring that we are fiscally responsible, that we maximize our revenues, and that we provide the best service possible for the residents of Lower Paxton Township. George has never lost focus of the reason for the Friendship Center, and that is to serve our residents in our community. So George, as you move on to the next phase of your life, on behalf of the board, I wish you good health, a peaceful retirement, and a sincere thank you for an excellent job done. And more importantly, I'm very happy that you'll never have to miss the opening of another Steelers Monday Night Football game because of it.
Thank you, Jack.
Then again, they were our fastest meetings of the year, so for whatever that's worth, I'll miss those. So thank you very much, George.
Jack, thank you very much. Very much appreciated.
I'm sure there's others that want to speak. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Tom Stang, Waste Management.
Hi, Tom Stang from Waste Management, and we've just had a long-term relationship with the township as your solid waste contractor, and just working with George has been a tremendous privilege. I couldn't not come out here tonight, George, and just thank you for all that you did in making our relationship work well, your professionalism, the people that you surrounded yourself with, that you were able to deflect the daily work that they could handle, the people that you surrounded yourself with to work with us were wonderful, and you just made our business relationship perfect. We appreciate the new contract. We're sorry you're not going to be here throughout it, but I'm sure you're not. So thank you for all that you've done on behalf of Waste Management.
Tom, the last agreement lasted 10 years. I'm not sure.
And Tom,
My last two, I don't know.
Tom, he will use the service, and if there's a problem, I'm sure he'll, as a resident, he'll call.
He has my number in his phone, I'm sure.
But I'll call the township first.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
My name is Polly Burke. Volunteer. And I didn't know I was going to speak tonight, but seeing how you are retiring, good luck, because I retired and look what I did. And so we know who to call. But I just want to thank you for all your support. And we had a problem that was big during the Lingelstown 250 or the Lower Baxter 250 celebration. Planning got as high as George with a question, he immediately made time for us and helped us work out the problem. So when I heard you were going to retire, I was happy for you, but I said, thank God the celebrations are over. So thank you very much, George, for all you did for us.
Paula, you're very welcome, but they're not over. You still have a Halloween parade that I hear you're doing.
Way to go, George.
Paul, you'll have time on your hands.
And Polly, but he is a citizen. You may want to get him as a volunteer.
Mr. Lighty?
Fred Lighting, Chairman of the Township Planning Commission.
Hey, Fred,
Wait,
jiggle
see,
that mic a little bit.
I don't think the mic's on.
Make sure it's on. Yeah.
Oh, it is on.
gets-
Should I speak
Okay.
louder
Weird.
or closer?
Closer.
Well, George, there's nothing I can say that hasn't already been said, but maybe I'll tell you a little story that you don't know. You were you were the first person to actually give me a volunteer opportunity in public service. Website. George and I did the very first township website together.
Oh.
And that actually led to me having an entire career in public service. I don't know if you know that.
Did not know that.
But you are so loved in this township, George. And thank you for everything you've done for the township and everything, especially for the Planning Commission, how you've taught us all what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing, and the support you've always given us. It's just amazing, and you're going to be missed, George. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, any other comments?
I can say that's enough.
No, George. Other than George, yes.
Good evening, authority members. My name is George Bass. I live at 106 Heather Drive in Harrisburg. And I was at the board meeting May 1st. I was asked to return by Mrs. Lindsay for this evening's meeting. At that time, I read over some prepared statement that I made relative to the unequal and inequitable sewer billing practices of this authority. Let me proceed. As this is my first time to attend an authority meeting, I'll try to be brief as possible. But the concern that brings me here is the sewer billing practices. I normally try to communicate my concerns via internet with little or no success, as most public officials don't reply or just throw a spin at you. My concern, again, is the inequality in the sewer billing system charges to a household, where the billing rate has once again been raised $5 per quarter, effective April 1st of this year, to now a standard rate of $153 a quarter. At this point, I'd like to give some background as to why I find this billing rate to be unfair to some homeowners in the township and truly more favorable to others. I'm a retired IT professional with over 4 decades in IT. Over half of those were as an IT consultant. During this period, I was assigned on and off to the Derry Township Municipal Authority wastewater treatment facility for some 10 years or more. Part of my duties were modifications and or enhancements to their sewer billing system, of which, in my opinion, was fair and equitable. I then researched the billing rates currently for Dairy Township, and as of March 2018, they are as follows. A flat fee of $11.80 per month, plus $5.60 per 1,000 gallons of metered water. A $43 per month flat fee is then charged for non-metered households, i.e. well customers. I then summarized my water consumption for the period January through March of this year, which equated to 12,000 gallons. Using the Dairy Township Municipal Authority fair rate system, my sewer bill for the 3-month period of January through March would have been $102.60 versus the $148 charged in January, with a savings to me of $45.40 for this period. Should my usage remain the same going forward, I could realize a savings of $50.60 per quarter and an annual savings of $202.40. And as retired, that's a lot of money. In my household, there's 2 occupants. When I evaluate the first 12 households as you turn onto my street, there are 7 single occupants, 3 double occupants, and 2 with more than 2 occupants. Also, some of the single occupants work, in which case they're not home for a large part of the day. And do you honestly think they put $153 worth of water into the sewer system in 3 months? What about households that have 3, 4, or more occupants? Who's putting more into the system? One other fair note that I would like to inform you of is where a homeowner in Dairy Township may install in the back of their homes what's known as a deduct meter. This can be installed at the homeowner's expense, the purpose of which is that water used to water a garden, flower beds, a pool, etc., never hits the sewer system. Thus, the usage is deducted from the water meter reading for sewer billing purposes. I'm not asking for the board to not collect what is required for the overall system, but rather to have costs billed fairly. Who put less in the system should pay less. Who put more in the system should pay more. In conclusion, I believe it'd be normal for me to perhaps ask for consideration, but I'm asking for action. Thank you. Any questions?
Sir, thank you for your comments. We're actually going to be reviewing the sewer billing practices as part of new business here, so we will circle back on this in just a few minutes, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, is there any other public comment of items that are not on the agenda? Okay, board member comments. All right, I do have one comment just to kind of piggyback on some of the comments from earlier today. And that is, George, I think I've told you this before, but, you know, I spent 12 years as a supervisor in Lower Paxton Township, and I've been on the Sewer Authority board for 15 or 16 years, and I was on the Planning Commission board for 4. And the one thing I learned from you, George, was professionalism. Professionalism on how to hold yourself out and how to hold yourself accountable for your actions and the things that you do, and to hold up to your word on what you're going to say when you're dealing with the public, and I've carried that into my professional career as well. So I just want to say, George, you know, it's been an honor and a privilege to work with you, and you know, those lessons I've learned from working with you, George, you know, they'll carry with me for a lifetime. So I appreciate everything you've done for me, George, and what you've done for Lower Paxton Township. So thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Dave.
Excuse me, and as the board members, the supervisors, we're deferring our comment until Mr. Wolf is totally finished. We have hired him back as of June 1st, part-time, so the board members here will defer our comments until the last possible day.
I'm going to say something.
Go ahead.
I'd like to add something and try and keep it short because this meeting looks like it might be a long one. But George, you know, and I've told you this before, and just the people out in the audience, and that when you look at an individual and you evaluate his contribution, a lot of times it's not always in the fact that we've accomplished a friendship center, the sewer of no overflows, and the type of things that have gone on in this township, parks being doubled in size. And George always seemed to never come back with, hey, I need more help. He's always able to do it himself, which to me says he's not doing anything. I mean, he's doing more, but what he's really doing is the people that are working for him, he's developing them, he's helping them bring up additional areas to under their belt, and encouraging them and cheering them on to do more. Because the things that this township has grown over the years, and yet the staff has not grown, is to me proof that George not only is a great leader, but is a great leader to the people that he has working for him. And I just think that that's been my really amazement at George, is the amount of work he's been able to push through his staff and get it accomplished well with very little feedback. If you look at our police department, one of the finest in the state, you look at what our sewer department has done. People call all over the country trying to find out what we're doing right. We have the Friendship in the Park system, which runs extremely well. You don't get all these things done. When it snows, I may get 1 or 2 phone calls. We got 50,000 people in this township worried about their driveway, their access getting plowed. Just taking care of the roads the way we do, and we keep cutting his money, the money that he's allowed to have back, and yet he still gets a lot done. And George, this wouldn't happen if it wasn't for your leadership in this township. And I think few people really know that you're like running a $60 million corporation, and you're doing it extremely well. That's out there affecting 50,000 people directly in many, many ways, digging up their front yard, plowing their street, all the things, pulling them over if they're running a stop sign, which I'm aware of that one. And so George was always done in the utmost professionalism. And George, I think it starts at the top, and I think that's you. And I just want to thank you. It's been great.
Mr. Horning and everybody else that has made comments, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. And briefly, there's a few people in this room that can remember my first day of work. And I see Lori shaking her head. Down in the old building, a day that I lost my voice and I had a cold, a terrible cold. But what's been accomplished here by Lower Paxton Township and the Lower Paxton Township Authority for the last 30 years is not because of me. It's because of excellent leadership from the top, the Board of Supervisors, Lower Paxton Township Authority, and the people that are involved in the operation and management of the township, whether it's the Friendship Center Operating Board, a newly formed Historic Committee, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Hearing Board, the Parks and Recreation Board, the Arts Council, the Shade Tree Commission, and I know I'm probably forgetting others, and I apologize for that. It's also due to probably the most outstanding staff that any municipality has in the state of Pennsylvania. A staff that's dedicated, a staff that shows up to multiple night meetings on a regular basis, and I certainly appreciate, and this board and the Board of Supervisors appreciates your hours worked. It's not often said, but it's recognized, the times that you are here, and it's very much appreciated. Finally, I'd like to just say on behalf of myself and my family, we've made Lower Paxton Township home. We did that 30 years ago. It was the best decision we ever made. My children grew up here, went to school here, went to church here. Some got into a little bit of trouble here. My wife and I both work here. We have lived here, recreated here, prayed here, shopped here. We've able to do it all in what I believe is just an outstanding place for anybody to live and raise a family. So thank you very much.
Okay, no other board member comments. There is no items of old business. So we will go into new business. First item is the reimbursement request for property owners at 4077 Roosevelt Court for water line repairs. Mr. Weaver, you're up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tonight, first item of business is a reimbursement request for a water line repair at 4077 Rosewell Court. The property owners believe that the authority damaged the water line in 2014 as part of the sewer replacement program. And I provided the board a memo in their packet, and did as best as I can to describe as much as possible what staff determined from our investigation. However, it is difficult to know who damaged the water line and how much to reimburse, if any, the property owners. There is also some pictures that I provided in the board, and today the property owners are here, I believe, Mr. and Mrs. Starsenik. They provided a letter to me today via email, and you do have that letter in your
Going
packet.
too fast here.
So at this time, I invite Mr. and Mrs. Starsenik. Do you like to come up and make some comments?
Let me get back. I'll get it.
Mr. Weaver, you said that was an email from today? They provided you with an email today?
No, they provided a letter via email, and the letter is in your packet there. It's posted with that agenda item.
I didn't refresh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There it is, okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, and this is my husband Jeff Starsenik from 4077 Rosewell Court. We've had an interesting winter with a water leak event, as we like to call it, because we found that we had used an immense amount of water according to our water bills that we started to receive, and we couldn't find the leak in the house. We ended up with 93,000 gallons of water wasted underground. Our average consumption is about 2,000 gallons of water. We even probably have used less than that, because now that both children have been away at college, our average is probably half of that, since they're the major water users. So what we did, we contacted Mr. Weaver back in March, actually. And I've been corresponding with him. He's been out to our property, and we did provide about 30 photographs of what occurred. And so we're seeking reimbursement. The total amount is about $6,058. When we noticed that there was an increase in water usage, we started to investigate. The first month, when we got a bill of over $100 instead of our regular $35, and then the second month we got a bill for $448, and that we immediately called Eschenauer and Son and another company, Pronto Plumbing, to come out and make an estimate on what it might cost to search for this. Eschenauer's came out to our property, and using their sonar device, attempted to locate the leak or some problem underground between the water main and our home, because we were told that Suez was not responsible for anything that occurred unless it was out in the road. They dug 5 holes looking for our water line until they located the pipe, the copper piping that existed, and found that there was a soaked bed of rock and a piece of PVC pipe that had been replaced from apparently the original copper piping that had been used when the house was built. And they repaired it from that point, and it was actually a 3-day ordeal during a snowstorm, and we were without water. The third month, since the second month we knew that there was a problem and that we were leaking water, my husband and I went out twice a day in the snow and reached down into the the water hole, and turned the water off while we slept He went out at 6 in the morning, turned it on so we could take showers, went out and turned it back off for the day when we went to work to conserve water, because it made me sick to think that that amount of water was just pouring into the ground. And we did actually save many. The second month was 52,000 gallons, and the third month was 19,000 gallons. So we saved a lot by doing that. And we have yet to have the landscaping from the holes that were dug and the mounds of dirt. We have yet to have that repaired. However, we do have an estimate for that amount, and that was the third amount that we listed on our amount for $782. And obviously, the rain situation that's been occurring didn't allow anyone to be able to move forward with that yet. Eschenauers has been kind enough to waive a finance charge fee because we have not paid that bill yet. It's $4,556. The Suez water bill total was $825, and if I subtract 3 months average, that brings it to $720. The Alliance Home Service for landscaping repair was $782, and so the total was $6,058. So we believe that when the sewer replacement project occurred several years ago in our neighborhood, that the contractors that the township used to locate the sewer on our property used inaccurate mapping, which would have led them to the location they thought they were going to go down and find our sewer pipe, but it actually hit our water line. And we believe that they then repaired. We know that, as Mr. Weaver said, that there was no record, but there was also no record of a supervisor even signing off on our property that it was, the sewer was replaced. So
It's supposed to be inspected. We were told it's supposed to be inspected every day during the process of the sewer line repair. And for some reason...
Can you get closer to the microphone, please?
For some reason, it was never inspected. They're supposed to come out and check it every day to check progress. And from what we were told, nobody ever came to even check on the work that was being performed.
Okay.
So I think just in looking at that history of what we had occur this past winter, and in looking back at the records, we haven't had any other digging on our property at that time, and we know from the previous owner that there wasn't digging, so we're asking for reimbursement for that, in that there was an error made during the sewer replacement project.
Can I say one other thing? Through the process of them, when Eschenauers came out to try to figure out what was going on, they pinged it. You know, they have a sonar device. They hook onto the line and they can send sound waves through it, I guess. And they started at the pit way out, which is like 120 feet away from our house. They couldn't find the line because in hindsight, they were hitting that plastic, wasn't pinging. It won't ping. So instead of starting at the meter base, they went to the house and started the house. And they kind of incrementally from the house out, kind of ruled out different sections of the yard, and by pressure testing to see that the leak wasn't here, there, or somewhere else. And when they got out to where that repair was, they found it. They took the plastic out and they soldered in copper that matches the line that was there originally. And now the problem is gone.
I think that's everything.
So, Mr. Weaver, can you respond to the inspection? How often is that inspected?
Sure. So in my the packet the board has, I provided the inspector logs for the days that the sewer was under construction for 3/14, March 3rd, 2014, and then also on March 6th, 2014. So we did have an inspector on site full time, and he does provide, you have in your packet, his report, what the crew did. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the record about any damages to their water line.
Okay.
So how do we know if we're responsible or not? How do we figure this out?
Well, at this point, it's impossible to figure out. There's only some hypothetical theories that, staff and the engineer can conclude from, what we found in the field. And I tried to describe that as best I could in my memo. So what happens is when we start a project, we go off of the only information we have is that the sewer line connects into the main line at a certain point, and we don't really know where the private sewers are because there's no records of those. So we start by excavating at the curb and putting in the observation tee. There's a possibility, based on what we've seen out there, that they could have hit the water line when they were trying to find the sewer to put the observation tee in. So I provided a picture in the packet of a repair that was done with blue PEX pipe. There's a 2-foot repair that was done. And that's close to where the private sewer was shown on our construction drawings. The actual private sewer was found about 9 to 10 feet would be to the west. So it's possible. Our contractors do use blue PEX pipe. That's what the Suez uses for their own water line repairs. So that's what made this even more complicated. Is there was obviously a copper water line that goes to the house. Well, there was a repair done twice, it appears, with the blue PEX pipe and then a black piece of black well piping, which our contractors don't use. So that's a mystery. So you have in your packet, there's a picture of a 2-foot section of blue pipe, which is in the proximity of where they could have dug. And then there's this black well pipe that goes up about 9 feet. So it's possible that the contractor looking for the sewer line could have hit the water line, not told anyone, and fixed it because they don't get paid for something like that. But again, it's not listed in our report, so staff cannot conclude that. This is all hypothetical things that could have happened. Quite honestly, we have to take the property owners at their word. They've lived there for 20 years, and they are claiming that there's been never any work in that area, and the water line should be copper then, from the house to the connection with the well meter pit. And that's not the case. You can see from the picture that there was a piece of blue pipe and a piece of black well pipe. So there was could have been 2 repairs there at some point in time. The other thing that we can do is we can research Google Earth. I had Tim do that. The power of technology now, you can actually go back and look at past activity on the property to see who could have damaged it. We couldn't find anything. We found a lot of work that you did on your property. They have a beautiful property, by the way. They have a creek that runs right through it. But we didn't see any work that was out that close to the water line where it was damaged. And then Jim looked through all the one calls to try to find if there was any other utility work in that area. We couldn't find anything for their property that showed any other utility work. So, again, we don't have any record to show that we damaged it. And I know there's some questions from the board today about the legality of it, and I'll let Steve answer any legal questions. But there is really no responsibility for the authority to provide reimbursement since the contract is over. It's 4 years old.
Just, can I ask one question, Bill, before we get to legal?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I'm not getting the big picture. This was 4 years ago?
Yes.
The sewer. And so what happened in those 4 years? So it was been leaking that long?
No.
issues.
We had no issue until January, is when we went from 2,000 gallons consistently as our average usage to 22,000 gallons in January.
Your theory is that
The connection
It failed, the connection.
it was struck and weakened or something 4 years ago, and then it failed recently?
that it was struck
the
and
repair,
repaired
yeah.
with the PVC pipe 4 years ago.
Yeah, what happened
Okay.
was that
That would have failed.
Okay, that we broke it, we repaired it. Okay.
But there's
And
no
then it's just
record
a-
that
it's just
we
failed.
repaired it.
Sewer
Am I
exit.
right?
No,
No,
so typically, and Tim can give you some more background if you like, but typically contractors are really particular about records, and the reason is they get paid for it. So anything that happens on someone's property, they have detailed records, they take photographs, and you can see from our report from our staff, we're very detailed as well. So it'd be very unusual that we'd hit the water line and there'd be no record of it, and that's the case here. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but again, we actually did call the contractor. Do you want to let them know about that?
Yeah, we got in touch with Ronca. They were the contractor that did this work, and they went back in their records. They have, like us, no indication, nothing in their files that says, a water service was hit here. And like Bill said, if there's a potential for the contractor to get an extra, they're going to document that sort of thing.
Well, if I could make a comment in relation to that, then the mapping system that is used in the township for locating sewer lines, is it as accurate, Mr. Weaver, as
Well,
you and I
as
have spoken?
Right. No, what I stated just a few minutes ago is that the township doesn't have any records for anyone's private sewer, where it goes. So the consent order we have, DEP, the state, and our court order requires us that not only do we have to replace the sewers in the street that we own, we also have to replace private sewers. And the reason is that if you just replace the main sewers, you won't eliminate the sewer overload because the water will just move to the private sewer. So we have about 300 miles of public sewer, but we have an equal amount of private sewer, another 300 miles of private sewer. And that's basically what the engineers at the state said, that you have to replace these private sewers. But they were built over the last 60 years and there's no record. So when we go out and replace private sewers, we're basically doing it blind. To engineer that would be counterproductive because we do have other methods in the field to locate it, and we really haven't had a whole lot of issues with that. So we don't know where private sewers are, so it wouldn't be a record-keeping thing or an accuracy of records. It's just, that's what, they didn't keep records of that 40, 20, 30 years ago, till just recent.
We've replaced numerous sewer lines from the street to the. I mean, when I say numerous, there are thousands.
Right.
Yeah.
So how we do that is during the house inspection, we try to find a clean out in the house and where the sewer connects in the street, and you basically draw a line.
Right.
And that doesn't always work either. It's just basically skilled labor. There's guys in the field that know what they're doing, and they have a way of, figuring this stuff out.
Let's let me ask Mr. Stein. Obviously, Mr. Stein, you're familiar with this situation. So from a legal standpoint, what is the township's liability here?
Well, Bill, was there a private sewer replacement agreement for this?
Yes, there was.
Okay. There's a paragraph in the private sewer replacement agreement where the property owner, and we've gotten thousands of these signed, it basically says the property owners hold the township and the authority harmless for any damage that may occur in the property. It does not absolve the contractor, however, but it does absolve the authority and the township. So in all these cases, the township and authority are held harmless.
Right.
May I ask also, the contract between the authority and the contractor also has a similar claim?
It does, where the contractor has to hold harmless and indemnify the township and the authority.
And may I also acknowledge quite the ordeal you guys had to go through, but also I do recall a neighbor of mine also having a break later on, like 2 years after the sewer lateral was replaced, and I have seen firsthand the detail that the authority staff has put in. They actually hit the water line
and document exactly where they hit it and where the new leak was, which had no relation. So just putting it out there that I've seen firsthand the detail that goes into recording these instances.
Any other board member comments at this point?
Do you have the Suez contract for the water line from the curb into your house that they offer? It's by USA or HomeServe,
The
excuse me.
insurance,
No, okay.
May I ask Mr. Weaver another question?
Sure. Go ahead.
With records being kept in detail, would the contractor have a record of the actual mapping of where he dug?
I'll let Tim answer that, actually, my engineer.
I would say probably not. They may, at the very best, they might have had pictures, but if it wasn't anything out of the ordinary, I wouldn't think that they would have specific records showing exactly where the trench was or anything like that.
Then, Mr. Weaver, what were you talking about when you mentioned to me that there was inaccurate mapping, that it was old, and that the possibility that they had followed the old mapping, which then lined up with exactly where our water leak was?
The construction drawing is given to the contractor that shows where the sewer comes out from the street. So, as I mentioned earlier, the best we can do is do a house inspection, and inside most people's basements, there's a clean out in your house, okay? So they just draw a line between 150 feet, and maybe even longer in your case, between the middle of the street to the house. So that record that I'm talking about for what we had in the main to draw to the street didn't provide enough accuracy to locate the sewer line. They had to do other things in the field. So again, it's as simple as just drawing a line and hoping that when you dig at the curb, you're gonna hit that spot. Now, there are other technologies available. If there's a clean out that we can find, they put a camera in the line, and it has a sensing device that you can pick up above, so you can actually locate the sewer that way, and that's typically how we do it in the field. In your case, according to what it shows on your inspection report, is your clean out was buried and actually cracked, and that's where the leak was. So what I'm suspecting what happened in the field is that they had no way to TV the sewer to locate it, so they probably, I think your husband mentioned there was a pretty big hole out there. So they were probably probing with the backhoe trying to find the sewer line because they couldn't TV it. But again, it really wasn't so much to be clear that our records were inaccurate. It's more of, we don't have private sewer records.
So would it be fair to say that if you were an engineer and you drew that line for where you assumed that our sewer line ran from the house to the main, because I know personally, I can show you that it actually is on an L for our water.
Right.
Our water.
Right.
And since we have a creek that runs and our pipe actually goes underneath the creek, would it be fair to assume that if the straighter line is what they assumed it ran, and that lines up with where our actual water line break was?
Again, it's all subjective at this point because we just don't know. Just to clarify and try to be as clear as I can, we've actually seen plumbers run sewers like this, like a snake. I mean, for whatever reason, we've seen the craziest things out there with private sewers, and we just don't know what we're going to run into out there. And unfortunately, again, the only thing I could do for the board is have our staff and the engineer investigate it and provide as much information to them that we had. And what we found is 2 inspection reports that show that the water line wasn't hit, and there's everything else that we talk about this evening is just going to be all hypothetical, so that's kind of where we're at.
May I ask if, in fact, there was documentation that the line was hit 4 years ago, it would still be on the contractor for replacement if there's an issue 4 years later. It's still not, authority is still not.
No,
party to that.
the property owner would certainly have a right to, sue the contractor to get those damages taken care of. But there would be nothing in the contract, correct? We have the Authorities Act really requires an 18-month security, and that's really the limit that we do. Anything more costs you more from the contractor, and that's just not worth it. So it's usually a 1.5 years maintenance.
Is there a statute of limitations under a suit to go back to the contractor? Okay, I was simply asking counsel if there was a statute of limitations on being able to file a suit against the contractor.
Mr. Weaver, what if people, when they're approached, they just say, I don't want the township to come and do the work on this private sewer line, and I'm not going to sign the waiver? Does it still have to be done?
It does, yes.
As under the consent decree or under?
Under the consent decree, it's a requirement,
DEP.
so the sewer
From the
authority.
state, not from us. I mean, the
Yeah.
state's requiring the township to do this.
It's a state mandated program to eliminate overflows and basement backups. So the authority has condemnation powers, and Mr. Stein gets a list of properties that we don't receive a signed private sewer replacement agreement, and then he has to proceed with the condemnation proceedings. And that's normally not a whole lot, usually 5 or 10%. So the next project we're doing is 650 properties, and we'll probably only have about 60 that don't sign. It's the biggest project we've done to date. But for this project, it was pretty large. Forest Hills is a big community. There would have been 300 properties up there, and I assume they're probably have to go back in the records, but it'd be about 30 to 40 people that probably had to have a condemnation proceeding to allow us access to do the work.
And then who pays for the work?
It's all done through the authorities.
Under that
Fine.
scenario, under condemnation, who would pay for the work? It would still, authority would still pay for it?
Yeah, the authority still pays through it, yes, through our capital improvement plan. Yep.
Okay. Any other comments at this point?
Void of default, since it's difficult to determine, is there anything the township can do at all? Assuming that it was our fault.
Not that I know of. I mean, there's a contractual provision which holds the authority and the township harmless.
So even if it was our fault, we're still harmless.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
And that was my follow-up, asking what the statute of limitations are. If we can't, does it give the applicant here the opportunity to go back to Ronca and file suit against them?
If it's an action that sounds in tort, like negligence, that statute's usually about 2 years. If it's a contract action, it can be longer, 4 years, 6 years, but this wouldn't be a contract because the homeowners didn't have a contract with the contractor. So it'd be more like a negligence claim. But there is a discovery rule in the statute of limitations which provides that if it was not discovered and could not be discovered at the time, then the statute doesn't run until it is discovered.
Oh, okay.
Did you try contacting Ronca?
Today is the first time I heard that name from Mr. Weaver. In my correspondence, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I would suggest, if the board wouldn't mind, I would suggest that maybe what we do is, Bill, could you get them in contact with Ronca, maybe kind of take like a liaison type of a approach to it, where you can kind of work with them and Ronca, get Ronca to come out there, take a look at it, maybe see if Ronca has any records or details of any of the work that was done in that area, to try to figure out, to try to help them get some relief, because clearly from a township perspective, I don't know if, well, not that I don't know, I'm pretty sure we're not going to be able to do much on the side of reimbursement. But maybe Ronca, since they're the contractor,
right,
could come out, take a look at the situation, maybe make a determination of, it's good likelihood that our guys did hit that line, and maybe they can get some type of middle ground settlement.
Well, and with that, I'm just going to build on what you said, but as you heard council say, with the discovery, there may be a possibility, and that would be information that could be introduced, obviously, with Ronca when you have that discussion with them.
Right.
And or your own counsel, if you need to go that route, because that's another expense.
Staff will reach out to Ronca, and we can schedule a meeting with the property owners.
Okay.
And if they show, great.
And then
If
you
they
can,
don't, there's really nothing we can do other than
Right,
put you
and
in
then
touch with them.
What you can do then for the board is to keep us
Yep.
apprised
Right.
of what's going on.
We'll
So,
do that.
Okay.
Certainly, I think, certainly, I gotta get used to turning that on. Certainly, I think that going forward is, and you've had very good success in getting a lot of buy-in from the community in proceeding with these very difficult construction or digging up sewer lines. And up to this point, I mean, we've been doing this for 20 years. We've had very little bad publicity. I think that's been key to the success of the program and the willingness of homeowners to sign over their rights in a way to have people come in. So I feel, although it's kind of difficult to prove who did it and we're clearly not on the hook for it, however, keeping our job easygoing in the future and keeping the success of the project going, because we still have a fair amount to do, would be key not to having bad publicity. And so that it would get more compliance in future considerations when we dig up systems. So certainly, although we may not have any financial obligation, I think we do have some obligation to make sure there's goodwill done. And so, Bill, if you could try and do whatever you can.
Sure,
To
we will.
withdraw with Fred and
Yep.
see if you can get him to buy into it.
And I think this is a good first step, because I heard Mrs. Starcenik say she heard the name Ronca for the first time tonight. And so from that discussion, I think with Mr. Weaver's help, that may be another door.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
There's a
you.
question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come up to the podium.
I just have a quick question. Ronca did not replace my sewer, township personnel did. If I have an issue, what's your liability?
So,
Township personnel replaced my sewer line,
and when was this?
within the last 18 months or so.
I can address your
just-
question. Yeah, so.
I have as a question.
Right, the private sewer replacement agreement is specific. There is a specific section for that. And basically what it tells the property owner that the township does not, or the authority, own that private sewer. We're replacing it as a requirement of the consent decree. And after the work is done, the maintenance and all responsibility is the property owner, since we don't own it. Now, there's an 18-month guarantee of the contractor. So essentially, if anything would happen within 18 months, we would take care of that. After that, now there have been rare occasions. We've done probably 9,000 or 10,000 of these things in the last 15 years. There's only been one or two where we found the contractor was negligent, and we have gone back and fixed it because it was proper slope or something crazy.
Right.
But that just doesn't happen. But if it would, but yeah. So the answer is that the private property owner would have to maintain it.
Right. Okay. All right. I don't think there's any action we need to take there with the reimbursement request. At this point, you're going to reach out to Rhonda.
Yes,
And
I
okay.
made a note to do that.
And then keep us apprised.
Okay. Next item of business is a review of sewer billing practices. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, board members, as requested, I provided some information in your packet regarding the difference between a flat rate bill and billing by water consumption. So what I provided in your packet is the current flat rate billing policy. Some information about rate consultants doing a cost of service study to do billing versus water consumption and new customer classes. Then I've also provided the legal requirements under the Municipal Authorities Act And lastly, I provided the national rate studies on authorities billing by flat rate versus commercial rate. And in summary, I can certainly answer any questions that the board may have, but just to highlight each of those sections, flat rate sewer billing is typically used when expenses are predominantly fixed expenses. In theory, the authority's fixed expenses remain the same regardless of the volume or the strength of the wastewater discharged by customers. In addition, we have agreements with Swadera and the City of Harrisburg. As part of those agreements, we have to pay a flat rate structure. This was established back in the 60s and the 70s as the most equitable and administratively feasible. So if the board would elect to hire a rate consultant and do a water consumption billing base, then they'd first have to consult Mr. Stein, who would have to reach out to these parties, and all the parties would have to agree to bill by water consumption, because that's what we pay for transmission and treatment. So that's a little bit about flat rate billing. The advantages to the flat rate, so I've provided some advantages and disadvantages between flat rate and water consumption. There's 4 advantages to flat rate billing and 1 disadvantage. The 4 advantages are: you have reduced staffing and you have a simplified billing process. The second advantage is you have revenue stability. Third is it complies with all the intermunicipal agreements. And lastly, your bond rating is not affected. As part of this bond rating process that George and I go through over the years, they're very particular. One of the first questions they ask are, do you bill on a flat rate or by water consumption? So they like revenue stability. The disadvantage, as the customer and resident is providing tonight, is you have potential inequities in distribution of the cost responsibilities for fixed income, single residents, and senior citizens that use below the minimum receive the same charges as other residents. Billing by water consumption. Basically, water consumption is usually done as a uniform volume rate, which is commonly used. So essentially, you have a set rate for all volumes. Historically, there's engineers that also, and rate consultants that design a uniform block rate, and that's basically descending rates for the more volume you use. So there's 2 different ways to do volume billing. So I spoke to Gary Shambaugh. He's the consultant that we currently use for negotiating the rate with CRW. I explained to Gary our situation. Gary said that the study is still feasible, and he gave us an estimate of about $55,000. And that would also have a credit in there for the current work. Basically, Gary explained that as I said in my memo, is that the allocated capacity in the treatment plant can be allocated based upon usage. And this is the main driving component to determine volume rates. And it typically does not involve the collection component. He also stated that if he gets halfway through the study and he finds that the savings are very small, it could still be beneficial for these residential customers that are on a fixed income. So I explained to Gary, I said, look, our engineers told us for 20 years, and you've worked with our engineer, that all of our costs are fixed. So is it really worth doing this study and paying $55,000? He obviously said he can't determine that until he evaluates all the water usage, does the study with the capacities at the plant. He did agree that it would probably be a very small savings, but you wouldn't know until you did the study. So the advantages and disadvantages, again, reversed. I provided the advantages to the water billing versus the disadvantages. So you have what we said before, is you have the equity and enhanced charges to each group of customers are defined, and the variations in cost to serve based on differences in volume uses are addressed directly. And then you have the potential savings to the single residents and seniors on low and fixed income households. Unfortunately, you have 2 advantages, and then I list about 8 disadvantages. It requires a rate study of $55,000, increases staff to resolve meter malfunctions and deduct meters. So we have 16,000 customers. Right now, just based on our experience, we have 6,000 of those that we do bill by water. You're going to have at least 5 or 10% meter malfunctions. So I just did a rough estimate of what it would cost just to deal with all these meter malfunctions and deduct meters.
Excuse me, Bill.
Yes.
What's the percentage of people on public water versus people on private water?
We have a guess of about 2,500 to 3,000 people that are on wells. Customers, not people, excuse me.
Customers on wells.
Yeah, so that would be, probably 15 to 20%.
Okay, all right.
So then you have the billing software modifications to calculate these deduct meters. As the resident said earlier, you do have to have deduct meters. So there's cost for the well people and the deduct meters. The estimate for the well meters is what we just talked about. I used $500 a meter. Would get you about 1.2 million for all these people that are on wells if they want to be billed by, and they have the option to do flat rate as well. And then the staff cost to read those meters and fix any malfunctions. Then you have the cost of the property owners with swimming pools and lawn watering. They have to put in deduct meters. So I just took a percentage of people that would do that, and this is probably on the low end. We have 16,000 customers. I estimated 2,000 at $500 each. That's $1 million just in meters for them. Then you have to have Mr. Stein do amendments to the intermunicipal agreements. And then, as I just briefly mentioned, your bond rating may be affected because the instability of water consumption. As you all know, this is a ever-changing thing. The water consumption continues to go down. So when we started this process 20, 30 years ago, the engineer estimated about 16,000 gallons per day 180 gallons per day per customer, 16,000 a month, 65,000 quarterly. So now Jeff Wendell just did a good bit of study with Gary Shambaugh for this Harrisburg study, and we're down to 11,000 gallons now per month and about 110 gallons per day. So and this is all the water conservation measures. So when you start billing by water, it's a lot of math gymnastics, of course, but the risk is that if you guess water consumption here and you have it here, then your revenue stability. And again, the bond people are really particular about asking those kind of questions. And then if you don't achieve that water consumption, then you may have to raise rates for annual consumption for cost unknown. And then just real quick, the legal requirements of the Municipal Authorities Act. The Act requires that the authorities fix, charge, and collect rates and other charges at reasonable and uniform rates. And obviously, we're doing that because we're doing a uniform rate to all customers. So I talked to Steve, and he can certainly give advice to the board. But when Steve and I talked, it was pretty clear that we're doing uniform rates and we're in compliance with the Act. And then what happens nationally? Surprisingly, I found that it's still predominant, like 85% of everybody around the country still bills by flat rate. Now, we have the example of Derry Township. Of course, I know all the folks at Derry. We're all a pretty tight community and in this area. So for whatever reason, probably because the rate consultant, again, said that the only thing that changes is the usage and the capacity. So it's still today, nothing's changed. And I was just telling George, the book I have in my office is 25 years old, and it's still the same book that rate consultants use. And nothing's really changed over the years. So, except for water consumption has gone down. But so I provided these surveys, and I can certainly get more for you. But 85%, I have the Massachusetts study in there, Connecticut, and there's a 50 city studies is the largest 50 cities in the country, and they are doing 87%, excuse me, flat rate. So that.
Bill, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Certainly over the years, in the last 20 years of doing I&I work,
right,
we significantly reduced the water going down to the treatment plants.
Right.
Have we seen a reduction in our bill?
You will, because your treatment costs will go down.
But have we seen a reduction in?
Oh, no. No, costs go up because they have to do expansions to their plant, like we have to correct our system.
You have
so-
to remember the vast majority of the cost in our bill from either Harrisburg or Swatara is for capital. It's not for treatment. It's for the cost of the plant and upgrades to the plant.
So even though we've sent them millions of gallons of less water, our costs have still gone up.
Our costs have still gone up, primarily due to recent capital expenditures in accordance
especially with Harrisburg. I mean,
Right.
Harrisburg's
Yeah.
capital
Harrisburg has
improvements
been,
are pretty substantial.
So even though the volume goes down, the treatment costs go up because the cost to treat becomes more expensive with improvements to facilities mandated by DEP and EPA.
And just all their expenses are driven just like us. You have payroll goes up. You have all your expenses for
We
electric.
sent them millions and millions of gallons less water.
Right. Well, again, this is what the engineers tell us, is all the costs are fixed. So you could give them 5 gallons or you can give them 50 million. All those facilities were built for a reason, and that is to treat peaks and average daily flows.
And you have to remember the purpose of sending them millions of gallons of less water was to keep sewage in the pipe and not overflow into the environment.
Right.
It was never done for cost-effective purposes. The cost-effective purpose would be to let it overflow into the stream, which we did in the 60s and the 70s, but that got us in trouble environmentally with DEP and EPA.
It still wasn't the right thing to do, but
Right.
Yeah.
This is some unbelievable.
Right. Again, it's a related discussion because what you're referring to is exactly what's the driving factor here is that no matter how much water a resident consumes or how much I&I that we have come in, that plant still has to treat flows every day. They still have to have all that staff there, just like we do. So that's really, in conclusion, it really dovetails into my conclusion, which is that 85% of the country is still doing it, which is predominantly the same as us. So,
I got one more question
Yeah,
before
okay.
you go to
Yeah.
your summation.
yeah,
So and the other question I have is, you got everybody on meters, even the people that are on well water, and then you start billing.
Mhm.
Now, who pays for the I&I water that gets in there that it's not metered in any session, but it all of a sudden, the I&I water ends up in our sewer system? How do we bill that?
Well, that would be part of the capital facility, and capital improvements are spread equally because it's an ability to use, and everybody has the same ability to use, so they pay an equal share for the capital.
So you would, the I&I cost would get wrapped up in, the I&I treatment costs would get wrapped up in.
Once again, for the
no,
newbies,
that's a
I&I is
different
what?
issue- that's a
I&I
different
is
issue.
infiltration and,
clear water, yeah, groundwater.
sorry, just for people watching, we're hearing I&I a lot.
Yeah.
They need to know what
There's
they're
two
all about.
issues. There is I&I treatment, and Bill can tell you that we pay extra to treat, especially at Swatara, and it's a small amount, for excess flow. But the repair of the system, capital
I
improvements,
understand that.
they're spread, and that's why our
No,
costs have gone up.
I was just talking about, George, if you meter everything in, but then you have this unknown source, and it's not a small amount, it's millions of gallons, who pays for that? You'd have to somehow average it over everybody?
It's an illegal source, so you can't. Steve will tell you. He's quiet over there until he's asked a question, but I'm sure Steve will
Smart
tell.
guy.
Yeah, it's an illegal I&I source, so you can't really charge them. You have to tell them to get rid of it.
And let me answer it in the reverse. Jeff Wendell, and you were around long enough to remember him saying that everybody in Lower Paxton Township could leave and go away for the weekend, and if we had a storm, we'd still overflow 200 and some manholes and exceed our capacity in Swatara.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the cost to improve the system,
No, I'm not talking about the cost improvement, the cost
but
to treat that water.
that's the most significant cost. The cost to treat the water is insignificant. The capital cost of the improvement, the $25 million that we borrow every 3 years. That's a capital cost. That's why our rates have gone up, and that is what is spread evenly across the system.
So that, all that I&I water that got in, like you said, if everybody left, assuming everybody left and nobody's paying sewer rates, sewing bills because nobody's here, you still got this I&I treatment cost.
Right, and
who pays that?
Okay, to be very.
I mean, it may be small, George, I admit, but who pays it?
Well, to be very specific, the only thing that Jeff Wendell convinced SWATERA of, and they agreed, our surcharge that we get from SWATERA, which keeps going down, is only for electric cost and chlorine, because basically what Jeff explained to their engineer, and they agreed, that the treatment plant runs the same for everybody, and this little bit more flow that we're giving them, this is the only factor that's involved, electric and chlorine. So, again, this gets back to the money that's involved in sewage treatment is a fixed cost. It's like you have to build all the sewers in the treatment plant.
Let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
So if you have consumer A, who's putting in 100 gallons a day.
Right.
And you can have consumer B, who's putting in 300 gallons a day. What you're going to say is the impact of the treatment at the sewer plant is only pennies or dollars or what?
That's exactly right, yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep. And you won't know that until you pay for the study, and he can tell you exactly what it is. These guys have it down to a science. I mean, they'll review every water record for every customer in the whole township.
Remember.
But, again, it's going to be probably pennies, but.
The most significant cost that we pay in our bills is not treatment, it's capital facilities by 85%.
It's subjective. I mean, rate consultants will tell you what you want to, they'll tell you they can manipulate the rate if they like. So what's happening in all the 15% of the communities, a lot of them, the rate can be manipulated to satisfy the community, and the board has the right to do that, as we just went over in the legal requirements, as long as they're billing everybody uniformly. But and I'll just conclude because this is I'm going to go off course for a minute, so I have to be quiet. But George and I were talking a little bit about, as an example and a parallel. Let's just say Tim and I are in college together, and we buy a house, and we split the mortgage. And then Tim says to me, well, I'm not going to be here all the time. I'm traveling, and I'm only going to be here 20 days. And then we get jobs together, and he's a traveling salesman. He says, well, I'm not going to be here for 10. Well, you still got to pay the mortgage. So there's a serious parallel. I know it sounds a little crazy of a parallel, but there's a significant parallel between that example and sewer, because you have a debt. You got to pay the debt like a mortgage. And all these customers that we have to pay a share of that debt for all these sewers, the treatment facilities, and that's really the downside for people that don't use a lot of water.
And Mr. Weaver, how much have we borrowed so far for the sewer replacement?
Our current debt with the last audit's $125 million.
That's I thought it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a statement? First, correction. Deduct meters, as I made my statement, is at the homeowner's expense, not the township. And you talking about reading water meters? Derry Township Municipal Authority gets the water meter readings from the water company. They download them computer to computer. There's no.
We would do the same, right? No,
whatever Derry gets, they get from American Water.
Right. My report that I gave the board, I did say that the cost would be to the property owner. So it's the same, though.
But you mentioned something about $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but if the homeowner's paying it, so what you want to do is save people money on their bill. So if a homeowner has to pay over $1 million, then what's the savings? Does that make sense?
What's that $1 million?
No, it's $1 million for everybody. So let's just say you don't use any water, but you for yourself, but you want to water your grass or you have a swimming pool. Well, then you have to get a deduct meter. So if you pay $500, then where's your savings?
Well, my savings is going to be $202 right now. $202.40.
Right. Well, that's what a rate consultant would have to tell. Yeah.
All right. Is there any other comments regarding the review of the sewer billing practices at this point?
Just one question. I'm sorry because you've been so detailed. But what would be the explanation, and it's probably in there what you said, for Derry Township, a gentleman like him saving $200 in Derry Township? What do they, I mean, they use a different,
Well, I was going to actually
Yeah.
make a quick comment on that. I mean,
Yeah.
demographics do play a part into whether you use water consumption or whether you use a flat rate. And the other thing too to keep in mind is going to be the age. When the age of the capital the capital facilities would also play a difference.
Exactly.
Because if your capital facilities, see, I think the one thing that we got to keep in mind is that, you know, we're talking about we send sewage to Harrisburg, we send it to Swatter Township. I mean, it's well documented that Harrisburg has not kept up with the times in regards to treatment, so therefore you're going to see a significant amount of capital cost from Harrisburg to get them up to speed. Derry Township, I'm not so sure what the situation is there, but I think when you look across the board and you look at things where you're using either a water consumption versus a flat rate type of scenario, the capital that's in the capital that's in place, the age of the system that's in place, I think does play a big difference in there, because if you have a relatively new system that's in place there for treatment and it's been well maintained, well then you can probably get away with doing something with water consumption versus a flat rate system.
Right.
So I think what I'm trying to get to is I think every situation is unique and different. I don't know what the specific details of Derry Township are or why they use water consumption. You know, I can speculate, but I don't know what the details of that are. So
I can certainly reach out to them and, you know, find out, but
well, I just appreciate you just touching on that, because
Yeah.
because that's a nice, it looks like an apples to apples, and it demands an explanation, and clearly it's not an apples to apples, because we know the majority of the costs are for infrastructure, and
Right.
we're billed a flat rate from our sewer treatment plant people. We don't have our sewage treatment plant. We're billed a flat fee that we have to pay,
Right.
plus all the work, so.
yes.
And Mr. Weaver, has Derry replaced any of their sewers? Are they in any program like we are?
Well, they would have the requirement, so the treatment plants have a different requirement than we do. We're collections. Our requirements are no basement backups and no sewer overflows. Theirs is the Chesapeake Bay requirements and nitrogen and phosphorus and what they discharge into a stream. So we have to provide our cost share for that for Swatter and Harrisburg. So Derry Township, you know, would have been mandated, just like Swatter and Harrisburg were, to upgrade their facilities to treat for phosphorus and nitrogen. Their collection system's very old, so I don't know. Some of it is combined, which gives them a little bit more of delay on when they have to do repairs. So I just don't, you know, we have enough to do in Lower Paxton. So unfortunately, I don't know enough about Derry's system to really comment.
But that's the point. That's the point I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Is that Derry obviously is under different mandates than
Right.
we're under. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. So you have to take each situation
Right.
separately in determination of what makes the most sense.
They probably put 10, 12, 15 million
Yeah.
into a plant, whereas we've now borrowed 125, 150 for our infrastructure.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Justin.
So just to, one last comment was that what I was putting in the packet was, obviously we wanted to give information to the resident that desires to be billed by water, but if in the future you want to consider you know, doing the rate study, then we would want to prepare for that when we prepare the budget for 2019.
And that was 55,000?
Estimate, yes.
Yeah, the estimate was 55,000. I mean, I think, I mean, a decision on that doesn't need to be made tonight, but I think it's worth at least having that discussion again, whether we want to go about that process, because
Sure.
I think it would be some valuable information, although I know 55,000 is not exactly a drop in the bucket, but it would be valuable information to have.
Right.
To see how a water consumption scenario would play out.
Mr. Chairman, I do have 3 comments.
You know
I've been-
what?
I've been waiting
Mr. Crispin,
patiently.
I want you to jump right in there, right to the
Thank
3
you.
comments.
And I would concur with the first comment, which has to do with Dairy Township has entirely different organization, entirely different structure, entirely different organization, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't sit and think and compare with Dairy Township. Number 2, and Bill, I want to build on your scenario that you described with regard to living together, having the same mortgage. I used to hear this one in another profession. I live in the school district. I have no children in school, therefore I should pay no school tax.
Right.
We all are responsible for the education of our children, whether we've had children in school or whether our children grow, or we're helping to support our grandchildren, nieces and nephews. So that concept for me holds true here as well. And the third one, which is for me glaring, because for me it has a major impact on the overall financial situation of this municipality, and that is to go from a flat rate to the other rate. It does, and you've spelled this out clearly, and this is could be a loss of millions of dollars, and that is if our bond rating would change. And there is a possibility that our bond rating would change. I will push very hard to maintain a bond rating that will allow us to raise money, to borrow money at the lowest possible rates, because this municipality enjoys a very high, one of the highest bond ratings in our immediate area and within the Commonwealth and in the nation, and I will not jeopardize that under any circumstances.
Okay.
Those are my 3 comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Crispin, thank you for those comments. Very succinct. Any other comments from the board? Okay, if there's no other comments, let's move on to action on the reimbursement agreement with Eric Kessler for ductile iron pipe replacement. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have a reimbursement agreement for sewage facilities prepared by Mr. Stein, transmitted to the developer for Forest Hills Commons. The project is located along the west side of Colonial Road, just north of Linglestown Road, behind Sheets. As you are aware, anytime there's a new development of substantial size, like a shopping center, we want to do a project to get the work done before they do any improvements, because it's really difficult to do that work after they do their development. So we did the sanitary sewer 2018 projects bid, and that bid was awarded by the board. It's currently under construction, and Tim's going to give a report on that. And ironically, when we got the drawings from the developer, they did show these problems with the sewer line where they had storm sewer inlets and a driveway over the sewer. So the engineer recommended approval of the plan based on the condition that the contractor should be responsible to contribute their fair share of the ductile iron pipe that would be under their stormwater inlets in their driveway. The ductile iron pipe is used so we can pretty much guarantee that we never have to go back there and do any maintenance anymore. It's a stronger pipe, and there's less chance of failure. So we reached out to the developer, and we provided this reimbursement agreement, and based on the percentages, you have in that agreement that his contribution would be $8,775. Steve did transmit it to, again, their counsel. I heard back from the developer, Mr. Kessler, and he emailed me today the signed agreement.
Oh.
So it is ready for board action.
You do
Thank
have
you,
the
Ms.
signed. Okay.
Good.
Thank you,
there any
Mr.
other
Weaver,
item?
for anticipating my question.
I made
Has
sure
the
I got that
gentleman
agreement
signed-
today.
Yeah, because on my copy, it is not signed. So thank you for assuring me that there is
There
a
you go.
signed piece. Okay.
And I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Tim certainly is here to answer any other questions you have.
Any questions for staff from the board?
As long as he's willing to pay, I think we're good to go.
If there's no other questions for staff, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the reimbursement agreement with Eric Kessler for the iron pipe replacement, the ductile, I'm sorry.
Motion's on the floor by Mr. Crispin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Eby. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Wow, we got through new business. Now the township reports. Draft intermunicipal agreement for the Paxa Creek Interceptor. Mr. Weaver, you're hot tonight. You're
Yes, Mr. Chairman, actually, I'm going to be brief on all my reports because I want to give Tim as much time as possible because we do have a lot of issues. I think that Tim should probably give the board some updates on our construction project. So briefly, Steve and I met with Susquehanna Township Municipal Authority and the township manager. The Paxton Creek Interceptor Agreement needs to be revised. It's 45 years old. It has no language in based on current engineering where we have been told by GHD that we can carry 17 million gallons of flow through that pipe. So this is important now that we got our Paxton Creek Corrective Action Plan approved, and we're going to put potentially storage in combination with this interceptor to give GHD the tools they need to be able to design the storage and close out our program for future development. This agreement needs to be done. So we've got an outline here, and Steve will be meeting with their solicitor, and we hope to have a final agreement for your approval in August. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions from board members?
You don't anticipate any issues at this point, do you? I don't think.
They've agreed to everything in principle, so it benefits them as well.
Well, I assumed that when you said it
Yeah.
would be back in August.
Yep.
Fine. Move on, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Let's. No action needs to be taken there. So let's move on to the next item. Phase 2 stormwater utility fee implementation. Again, Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, information, since there's authority members that did not take place in the discussions that the Board of Supervisors had as part of the first phase of the stormwater utility fee implementation. I wanted to just give a quick update and provide, and George can certainly provide more information because he's more closely working on this with Raftelis, but you have in your packet the stormwater utility fee implementation plan, and it is very aggressive. So their plan is to have a fee ready for this authority by January 1st, 2019.
Okay.
And of course, the first step would be for the authority to get some kind of agreement with the township to operate and own the storm sewer system. And I'll let George take it from there because that's as far as I can go.
Well, Bill summarized it very well. The purpose of this portion of the study is for the development of a stormwater fee specific to property owners based, whether in all types of properties, based upon impervious area that will be levied to provide for stormwater facilities. That includes replacement of pipe, addressing and maintaining streams and stream channels and draining swells, addressing our MS4 requirements as an MS4 municipality, addressing the Paxton Creek TMDL, which has a sediment load limit and required reduction of 35% in sediment, and addressing the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, which requires a 10% reduction in sediment. So those requirements and duties will become an authority responsibility potentially as early as 1/1/2019. And to fund those responsibilities, the board has commissioned a utility fee study, which is now in process.
Okay. Any comments from board members?
I just real quickly, I know I sat in on one of the presentations, so I'm somewhat aware of this whole process. I was just curious when the amendment documents are going to happen, or when this authority will become that entity.
Well, at this point, we're going to be having regular meetings with Raftelis, and you can see in their proposal, one of the key things is to have Steve prepare amendments that you're talking about to incorporate the stormwater, and that would have to happen first. So I would expect in August they would have that ready. And then from there, they can start developing the fee.
Okay.
So
I'm assuming that at this point, the new board has voted to go down this road for sure or
Th-
not?
This authority has not done anything.
No, but the Board of
Yeah.
Supervisors.
Yes.
The Board of Supervisors has commissioned, this is the second study. The first was an initial study to determine if it was feasible to have a sewer rate versus funding stormwater improvements through taxation. That study proved that a sewer rate levied by an authority was an efficient way to fund necessary improvements. This phase 2 study is to establish an equitable fee that could be levied by an authority. The Board of Supervisors has yet to make the final decision whether or not the authority will be signed that function.
Okay. All right. It looks to me like this process is well on its way, so we'll wait to get updates as the process keeps moving forward. All right, if there's no other questions there, we will move on to the status of the second consent decree. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, yeah, the status of the second consent decree, mini basin construction projects.
Chairman and members of the board, you have in your packets here tonight the mini basin construction projects status update. I'm going to go through here briefly. Feel free to jump in, ask any questions as I get through this. George, could you pull up the location map for
I can
this?
do that, yes.
That's good there. So the first project I'm going to talk about is the PC4C4E project. I'll show you where that is here on the map. It's this purple area right here. Dolly mobilized back to the site about 2 weeks ago to take care of punch list items. Probably the main thing to consider here tonight is they anticipate that they're going to finish all work by the middle to the end of June. We do expect the final contract value to come in somewhere around $8.3 million, which is considerably less than the original contract value for this project. And one other thing to note about this project, township board members should expect to see a final adjusting change order to close it out probably sometime this summer. Moving on to PC2A. That's this location right here near the Colonial Country Club. This, of course, is our lining project. We have 3 separate contracts for this work. Contract number 1 is for mainline lining, and the contractor is Mr. Rehab. At this point, all of the mainline liner is installed, it's in the ground, and the main thing we wanted to bring to your attention here tonight was that there's 9 sections that to date haven't passed an air test. So that's a good portion of the project. We met with the contractor a number of times and determined that their proposal to get these lines to pass was to install a second liner inside the first liner. And generally that's fine for the smaller diameter lines, 8-inch diameter, but we have 4 15-inch lines where this approach was going to be used. So we requested in those situations that they would use a thinner liner material, which was a special order from Germany. Delayed the whole project, the whole process here by about 8 weeks, and we're probably 5 to 6 weeks from when that decision was made. So we expect the liner to be on site here in the next 2 to 3 weeks and then installed a week or 2 after that.
Okay.
Contract 2 is for lateral lining. The contractor is Mr. Rehab. At this point, they have all but maybe 8 or so laterals lined, but to date, they've only gotten a total of 8 laterals to pass an air test out of around 46 to install on this project. So what we have from them at this point is a letter from the liner manufacturer stating that there is an acceptable amount for an air drop or a pressure drop on an air test that we should consider. So our approach, and we've been in discussions with Mr. Rehab as well, is to let them finish. They have just a handful of laterals left to line. They'll be on site, I believe, next week to finish that work. And then we're going to meet with them and determine, which, if there's another method we could get or use to get these laterals to pass, or how many we'll be paying for.
Tim, what causes that for them not to pass?
We don't know. Generally what the manufacturer says is, there could be a space when they're plugging up the lines to do an air test. There could be a plug that is allowing just a little bit of air to get by it. There is a theory that maybe the resin on the liner itself has migrated, so it was stored, and maybe the top part of the liners, some of that resin is dripped off and kind of come down along the sides, or you have areas of uneven resin. But really, I mean, both in the laterals themselves and in the main, we've gone in and we've looked at it on the camera. We've done electroscanning, and there's no real silver bullet that this is what is causing this. I mean, the other possibility is there's pinholes in some of this material, and it's causing enough air to leak out.
Okay, I was just curious because you said only 8 out of 46 passed, so I was curious.
Yeah, I guess it would be important to note that maybe 2 to 3 of those passed or failed significantly. So there are some that are failing, but it is minor, but our specs don't allow for any failure.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question. Obviously, air is thinner than water. What if you filled the pipes up and then tested them, pressurized them up with air, and then watched how long it took for them to go down? That would be a more relevant test as far as its ability to hold water, because even in the sewer line itself, it's not even under pressure. So putting water in there and then pressurizing it up to 10 or 20 pounds would certainly be far in excess what the pressure would ever see as a result of the water being in there, or sewer water being in there. So wouldn't that be more relevant as to whether they're capable of holding sewage water from going into the environment?
It is relevant, and there is an ASTM standard that Tim can tell you more about for water testing. The problem with water testing is it takes a lot of time, and it's not cost effective.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be used unless absolutely necessary. But just to give you a little bit more information about this testing, I know we did mention this the last meeting, but now we have more data, and the data keeps getting worse. So around the country, believe it or not, as you had said earlier, we are kind of leading the standard here for a lot of this work, and we're always treading new ground. Well, we're one of the only ones that we know of in the country that actually requires lining companies to pass air tests. So we're dealing with these companies that have never been asked to do this before. That's the first problem. So then it goes back to the manufacturer, where the manufacturer is giving this product out and no one's testing it. So unfortunately, this is the first project that we ever did, and it's a trial and error. Now, is the board going to have the fortitude to pull the trigger on the next job with this kind of experience? It's troubling. So really, I believe it's not really a testing issue. I believe it's just you have the manufacturer and the contractor that's never been required to really have a lot more detail. And that's just me as the department director. I'm sure Tim could give you a lot of more engineering. And we can talk about this more as we go forward too, because this issue is not going to go away for the board, unfortunately, because there's going to probably, unless they make everything work, have to be some decisions made.
Because of the savings are so significant.
Right.
Like 80%, right? Something like that?
No, not that much.
Not that much?
The big job that we have coming up, it's a $15 million job. If we line the whole thing, it'd be probably between 10 and 11 million.
Oh, okay. Because I remember.
No, it's not. I wish it was that much, but
Was it? Okay.
No.
So, it's still significant savings?
Yes.
Okay, then the question would be, is it worth working with the contractor and the manufacturer to try and come up with a better system? If we can obtain incredible savings as a result of it, or significant savings?
We were doing that on this job just because we have people that have skills that have worked on both sides of the fence, and they're basically telling them their opinion, what they think is not working. And that's what Tim started to say is our lead inspector out there is basically telling them it's got to be resin, because resin is what makes the pipe works.
Right.
I mean, resin is basically, essentially with lining, you're curing the pipe in the field instead of making it in the plant. So if you don't have proper resin distribution, then it's not going to work correctly.
Right.
So a lot of this stuff is really detail oriented, and if they're not detail oriented, they're not going to get it to work. But yes, to answer your question, we are doing that because
Okay.
we obviously want it to succeed. I have a
Yeah.
joke in my office that I'm going to make team lining shirts, but so far I'm not.
Not very funny.
I haven't printed any. Oh well.
Yeah, Mr. Weaver, did we line out at TE on Jonestown Road, or no? There in front of the church, did we line that out there?
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
We had,
I thought we did, and did we have any issues with that?
We did have one issue there where a mainline liner didn't pass an air test. The approach was similar there. It was able recon. They put a second liner in, and they were able to get it to pass.
Okay, so you just go ahead and do the second liner, but then
Yeah.
you're putting more money out, so, okay.
Just I read the minutes and I noticed I said last time that you were going to keep moving with this project. The contract says they have to keep going until they pass. At what point do you pull the plug on this and just meter it? Or, is this going to cause change orders? At what point is it not a savings? Or is the air test and having to come back and get new product from the manufacturer over in Germany or whatever, at what point does that cost us more?
They signed an agreement to perform, so I again defer to Steve. I'm sure they have to make it work. So how many times they want to do that? They would have to come back to the board and say, you know what, we give up. So then you have to come up with a
Then
credit.
you don't get your T-shirt.
Yeah, I don't get my T-shirt. So then it puts a lot of pressure on Kevin and Tim to make recommendations to the board on what kind of credit you take. As you said, the metering is really going to be the proof of the pudding, but that's down the road after the contract expires. But I think this conversation is going to continue in August because they're probably going to have to extend their contract because I don't think they're going to have all their testing finished and have everything passed. I hope so. But to answer your question, what would happen would be a credit, but it wouldn't be a savings or a detriment that bad that you're not going to save money because this project, we've saved $800,000. Having to go back and replace sewers to get our objective, I don't believe is still going to be an issue. I still think the flows are going to go down. There's going to be a peak reduction, but that remains to be seen. This is all tough questions to answer for the board because it's a pilot project.
All right.
And
Continuing on.
the third contract, similar issues. This is manhole lining. Contractor, again, is Able Recon. Contractor is about 80 or 64% complete with the work at this point. And to date, they have 5 manholes that they cannot get to pass the vacuum test. With this contract, we're a little more confident that they will eventually get everything to pass, because those 5 manholes, we can see visual defects in the manhole that just need to be cut out and resprayed, and we feel, and their field staff also feels, that they can get these to eventually pass a vacuum test. Any other questions before I move on?
Nope, keep going.
Okay, the next project is the 2018 sanitary sewer project. There's various project locations. The work is primarily here, what we refer to as the Trunk A portion, up near Linglestown and Colonial Road. There's also some relocation work associated with the Capital Beltway Improvement Project, which is down on Raleigh Street, which is probably off the map, but down this way, and on Locust as well. There's 2 manholes being replaced in Colonial Crest, which here's Colonial, so it's probably in this vicinity, and a 15-inch main being replaced on Goose Valley Road. So the project had various project locations. Contractor is JOA and Bradley. As you can see from the report, they mobilized just about a month ago, and they're closing in on 50% complete. So you could probably tell that this is a relatively small project for us, but it hasn't been an easy project so far. So I did want to spend some time here tonight going over some of the issues with the bore under Linglestown Road. The sewer casing under Linglestown Road was to be a 36-inch diameter steel casing pipe, and it was to be installed using an auger bore technology. Your packets, photo 1 shows the technology. It actually shows the actual bore pit on the north side of Linglestown Road. Yeah, it's that one right there. So this, again, is on the north side of Linglestown Road. We have the drilling rig here. The casing pipe is going into the ground, and you can see you have the boxes set up for safety. This is a relatively deep hole. So this technology is supposed to be trenchless. The auger is pushing forward and pulling back material, creating a space for our 36-inch casing pipe to be pushed in. So when all goes right, it's a no-dig approach, but unfortunately for us, all did not go right. We were only able to get about 50 feet of the casing pipe installed, and the remaining 70 feet had to be open cut on Linglestown Road. The reason for this, we encountered unsuitable subsurface material. In your packets on the next page, there's photo 2 shows some of the boulders that we experienced on the north side of Linglestown Road near the bore pit itself. And then right past that point, if we would have been in a rock type material, we probably wouldn't have had a problem, but right past that point, we ran into some soft fill material, and the casing pipe that was being led by the auger bore was at first pushing down. The subcontractor was able to correct that issue, get it to go in, like we said, 50 feet. And then at that point, it started doing the opposite. It started getting into soft material and pushing up. And it got to the point where we weren't going to be able to put the 18-inch diameter sewer main through that casing pipe, which is the whole purpose of doing this trenchless technology. So after spending 2 weeks on the bore, the only option that everybody saw as being a guaranteed option to work was to cut the road. This required pre-approval from PennDOT, and it also required the contractor to perform this work at night due to the amount of traffic on Linglestown Road. Photo 3 here, you can see, if you go back up the page, this is the open cut itself. You can see our casing pipe right here, and then you can see the drill head actually broke through the casing pipe, which was probably part of our problem, that once it broke the casing pipe, it was riding up and getting into these soft areas where it just could not be kept going straight or at the very least flat. So the one other thing to note here, once we got in that far, we couldn't pull the pipe out. As you can imagine, you're creating a void, and then the pipe is supporting that void. If you pulled that pipe out, you could have settlement of the road above. And so this is really what we felt was the only option here. We worked with L&N Zimmerman from Myerstown, Lebanon County. They were the subcontractor that performed this bore. They've done a number of bores for us. They do this type of work every day, state of Pennsylvania and surrounding areas, and they've been in business more than 20 years. So when they told us it was their worst bore they've ever experienced, that kind of put it into perspective. It was definitely the worst we've encountered. I mean, I've seen 2 so far. I understand we've done probably close to 8 bores using this method. So it was just something to make you aware of. There will be a change order coming. We just don't have all the details yet as far as what it's going to cost. I can answer any questions on the 2018 project.
Tim, how old, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say any questions from
How
board
old
members.
is everything out there on Linglestown Road, do you think? All the digging and where you're at?
Actually, if you could
I'm
pull it
getting
back up, because it is interesting what we found.
Which one, Tim?
The actual mini basin construction projects. Yeah, that one. And photo 3.
Last one. 3.
That one right there. So you can see here, this is coming across Linglestown Road the way we're looking, and it's almost like there was a previous road built here. You can see this. This looks to be like a road. If you can move it up just a little bit, then this is our our current road. So that was something that was very interesting, that it really appears like there was fill one time to build a road and then a second time to build what we know as Linglestown Road now. There was
Old.
24-inch water main on the other side of the street. We don't have a whole lot of records on that, although it was put in, it was there when the original sewer in this area was put in. And then a couple gas lines actually on this side.
So it's pretty old.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious. Sorry, David.
No, that's okay. I was just saying, is there any other board member comments at this point? Okay. think your last one's Marblehead Street, or are you done with that?
I just have, one other thing. Just want to recognize our employees. Suez Water recently completed work associated with its 2018 water main replacement project. So Suez is contractors out there replacing most of the water mains in the area, and we try to coordinate efforts. We'll get our facilities televised and inspected before we know there's a project like this occurring. So we knew that Marblehead from Dartmouth to Rutherford would have to be a full overlay. This was a road that the township had paved 3-4 years ago, so it was newer than 5 years. We knew that they were going to have to pave the entire width, so we took a look at our sewers out there, and we had 2 mains that required dig up and replacement. So we were able to jump on that, tackle that in-house. As we mentioned before, our projects coordinator and one of our inspectors have done this in the private industry before, replacing mains. So it was a good learning experience for them to get on this. It also provided us with $20,000 worth savings when we compared the price for us to do it in-house, all rental equipment, all materials and labor, versus having a contractor like Bradley using their bid pricing just to get an estimate. And then, of course, we also realized the savings on engineering by not having to bid the project, and pavement costs since Suez is picking up the bill for that. So that's everything I have.
Okay.
Any questions?
I don't think there's any other questions, correct? All right, we're going to go on to the
One-
next
one-
item.
Not a question, more a comment, or
Okay.
maybe it is a question. Is there any possibility, George, that we could put the result of the savings in our newsletter or somewhere where the public could see that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other board comments? All right, let's go on to the next item, status of the design, funding, and public meeting schedule for the BC2A, BC, and BC5B project. That's you, Mr. Weaver.
Yes, it is,
You're back
Mr.
up.
Chairman. Again, I'll be brief because I know we've had a long meeting. Our next project, as I mentioned earlier, is BC2, which is basically everything north and south of Blue Ridge Avenue. It is the biggest project we've taken on, 650 properties. The largest we've done has been about 500 to 550. So in order to do that, we had to split up to 2 public meetings. And it is very difficult to get school facilities, and people are much nicer in churches. So Holy Name has been very gracious, and Father Quinlan actually would not accept any money.
Wow.
So
That's very
he
nice.
basically has offered his facility for both meetings. So we sent out the letters, and a week from Wednesday, we have our communications manager is also going to attend for us and provide some assistance, and we hope it all goes well. So I wanted to provide the board that information, so you have the list of people that got the letters, and there's various different letters. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
See if you can book them for when we do our storm fee outreach.
Yeah, there you go.
Let them know we'll be calling.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you.
All right.
Usually get pretty good turnout, Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, we get usually about 30 to 40%. As the projects go on, quite honestly, that's a good sign that people understand what it's about. They see it in the newsletter. So I have seen actually attendance go down a little bit each time. That's not a bad thing, though.
Are they worried about what it's going to cost them, how you're going to dig up their yard? What are some of the questions?
The biggest questions are actually not during the meeting. It's meeting privately before and after the meeting with Tim and my staff, asking very specific questions about their property, as you would expect when you bring big equipment on someone's property. They have a lot of questions. And that's really it. What are you going to be doing? Where are you going to be digging? I want to save my bush. I don't want to save my bush. Those kind of things.
Don't dig out my
Cut down my tree.
Yeah,
I don't have to pay
right.
to have it cut down.
Yeah.
All right.
And then finally, I have really good news under delinquent account reports.
Have at it then.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as directed by the Authority Board, Solicitor Stein and I and Modern Recovery met. We had some recommendations, and those recommendations that the board approved to be more aggressive with delinquent accounts is bearing some fruit. So I provided in your packet the balance of the delinquent accounts in the end of 2016 compared to what the delinquent accounts are at the end of 2017, with the implementation of our new procedures, sending accounts to collection agency 2 quarters delinquent, not 3, so being more aggressive there, and giving Steve Stein some of these really old aged accounts that were from the past collection agency and starting the sheriff's sale proceedings. So I have to really give all the credit, a lot of the credit to the board for asking us to be more aggressive, and credit to Steve because he's collected $240,000 in 6 months. That's pretty incredible.
Good job, Steve.
So
Well done,
we
Steve.
are at currently, at the end of 2017, $632,157 for delinquent accounts. That's pretty good. And I didn't have time to put in my memo, but Modern Recovery just gave a report that they continue to be aggressive on their collections, on their active accounts. And they just provided a report that they're still getting between 70 and 85% collection recovery. And I found this very surprising, that they have these national databases they use where for collecting government debt, the average is only about 20%. So they just put at the end of their email that the collections on their end is pretty good. So overall, the bottom line is we got as the board directed, we were successful, fortunately, in getting the delinquent amount down. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And Mr. Weaver, the Modern Recovery's fee for collection it's like a percentage of the balance, right?
Correct.
It's a percentage of what they. Okay, and
Yep.
what is that percentage again?
It's 25%.
Okay.
Yep.
But still, when you think about it,
Well,
25%.
Well, they recover that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff gets recovered.
Right. So, well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not. I mean, that's pretty good when you think about it. So,
Right.
okay.
And those collection fees, being more aggressive is actually, you're doing a favor to these delinquents, to be quite honest with you, because the collection fee is a lot less
Right.
on $200 than it is on $1,000.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Any other questions on delinquent sewer account collections? Good work on that, guys, by the way. You can't leave yet. I was gonna say. All right. So the final item, always the most favorite item, the engineer's report.
We're seeing.
Thank you, Mr. Blaine. You all should have a copy of our engineer's report in your meeting packet. Just one thing for Mr. Judd's benefit. We do prepare an annual report. It's about an inch or an inch and a half thick that is required as part of the consent decree. It covers the period, the annual period that ends next week, actually, at the end of May, and then we have another month to get it submitted to DEP by the end of June. So we are working on that, and you can also see from the engineer report, there were 4 extreme wet weather events, and I guess this past weekend would probably be a 5th one, with no overflows reported by the township staff. So we're evaluating all that data and getting ready to put a hard push on getting the annual report prepared. And at your August meeting, we will spend some time and go over what that report's all about. As far as projects, by far the most time that we've spent this past quarter was with the BC2 project that Mr. Knoll and Mr. Weaver reported about. We did put together a contract to test the PVC sewers in BC, the BC2 mini basins, and also BC5B. And then the next big project we've initiated is the BC7, which is south of Paxtonia, between there and Locust Lane. It's another very large area. So we already metered the PVC sewers in that area and included the testing in the DC2 contract. So we have a big testing contract that's out to bid right now, and bids will be open next Wednesday. So we also actually did receive comments from DEP on the encroachment permit, which was a little bit of a surprise based on how long it's taken them to comment on recent jobs. So we're in the process of addressing those comments and preparing for the public meeting, which is also next week. You all have our report, and I'm not going to bore you anymore with what we did. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Is there any questions on the engineer's report from anybody here? Steve Stein, you have a couple questions? No, you don't? Okay, you sure? All right. Any other questions from board members? Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. Fun and eventful as always. Just a quick announcement. The next meeting of the Municipal Authority will be on Tuesday, August 28th, 2018 at 7 p.m. here in this very room. All right. Is there any other comments from board members? Anything else to be added? All right. If so, meeting's adjourned.